Greetings from sunny New Jersey and welcome back. Today's a cool episode because we're going to be talking about the TurboGrafx-16. TurboGrafx-16 was kind of the black sheep of the fourth generation here in America, and it's a console that I've always wanted. I've never owned it. I finally have it in my possession, and we're going to talk about how I acquired it at a reasonable price, and how I kind of fixed it up and cleaned it up and all that good stuff. But first, before we get into the TurboGrafx-16 itself, I wanted to talk about kind of what was going on in 1989, because it was kind of a cool year for like music, movies, and video games. So if you don't care about that and you just want to hear about the TurboGrafx-16, go ahead and skip to this time. But otherwise, let's see what was going on in 1989. Bush Sr. had only been in office 8 months. Farvik Nugan was still the thing. Michael Keaton was Batman and Prince was doing the Bat Dance. Indiana Jones and Sean Connery were kicking Nazi ass on their way to Petra. Riggs was getting too old for this shit a second time in Lethal Weapon 2. Ghostbusters 2 made a ton of money while sucking. Not a bad year for movies. Now let's go check out what was going on with music. Michael Jackson had just been dubbed the King of Pop. Ironically, Milli Vanilli was trying to convince Girl that it's true. It was Bobby Brown's prerogative. Nina Cherry was doing the Buffalo stand. Madonna was all like, express yourself. Tone Loc was rocking that funky cold Medina. So that's awesome, but 1989 was also an awesome year for albums. Check out all the classics that came out that year. Paul's Boutique by the Beastie Boys, Doolittle by the Pixies, 9 Inch Nails' Pretty Hate Machine, Nirvana's Bleach, Faith No More is the Real Thing, Disintegration by The Cure, Stormfront by Billy Joel, Unfinished Business by EPMD, De La Soul's 3 Feet High and Rising, It's a Big Daddy Thing by Big Daddy Kane. Holy shit. So 1989 was obviously a big year for a lot of things, cool year. But what specifically was going on in 1989 related to video games? So, cool year, great time to be a gamer. People were still going to the arcades back then, a lot. And there were tons of like really cool arcade games. Like Final Fight came out. Just a ton. I can't even remember them all right now. But then you had a bunch of NES games come out because that was still going strong. You had like DuckTales come out that year, River City Ransom, Castlevania 3. Lots of cool games, can't remember them all again. But then earlier in the year you had the Game Boy come out, and the Game Boy was obviously a huge success. And then 2 weeks prior to the TurboGrafx coming out, its main competitor was launching the Sega Genesis. And the Sega Genesis was the first 16-bit system to be launched here in the States, and it was coming off a big marketing campaign. Now the Sega Genesis was launching at a slightly cheaper price, a whole lot of marketing behind it, more name brand recognition because people are aware of Sega from the Master System, although that wasn't a huge hit. But they had a lot of really popular arcade games, and they had obviously made some games for the Atari and Coleco and all that stuff. So people knew who Sega was. People didn't really know who NEC was and what the TurboGrafx was, but that's kind of the environment that they were launching into. Okay, so let's talk about the good stuff now. Let's talk about the actual TurboGrafx. So I was able to recently get a TurboGrafx-16 on eBay at a reasonable price. When I was looking at eBay for tested, working, guaranteed TurboGrafx, they were going for about $100, $125. I didn't want to have to spend that kind of money on one, so I kind of stayed patient. I kept looking out at listings, and I eventually found one that was about 30 bucks. It was untested, kind of looked dirty, but it didn't look broken or anything. So I checked out the seller's profile, and this is like a little tip for collectors, I guess. But he had sold other consoles, and he had said the same thing. Untested, sitting in storage, not sure if it works. Check the buyer's review of those products, and sure enough, one of the reviews was, hey, guess what? It actually turned out to work. That was a great sign for me. So I said, hey, you know what? It doesn't look broken. This review is saying another console worked, so let's take a chance. 30 bucks, why not? So sure enough, I took the chance, and I did a quick unboxing of the TurboGrafx itself. So let's take a quick look. All right, so what do we got here? Let's open this sucker up here. All right. Okay, so I actually had to fast forward a little bit because opening this box turned out to be a huge ordeal. So let's go ahead and see what is inside. There's our seat in the box there. Lots of packing wrap. Oh, looks like we got ourselves a TurboGrafx here. Alright, so here it is. This is the TurboGrafx. Obviously, there's some scuffs on it. We got this here. It looks like somebody spilled something on there. You know, a little bit of dust and all that stuff. Pretty much to be expected as it's been sitting in some guy's storage for a little while. It doesn't look too damaged. I don't see any big marks or anything like that, so I think this should be in pretty good shape. I don't know how it works internally yet. Hopefully it does work. Okay, so that's what I got for about 30 bucks on eBay. Not too bad. It wasn't in the worst shape. It's not in the best shape. It was obviously very dusty. It had a lot of scuff marks. But we're going to clean that up and we're going to take care of that a little bit later. But what I want to talk about now is the same seller emailed me. It was kind of a cool story. Emailed me later and he's like, hey, I found all this extra TurboGrafx stuff in the same storage. Do you want it 30 bucks shipped? I said yes, because what it was the controller, the original power cable, and then 3 games, which were Devil's Crush, Legendary Axe 2, and China Warrior. So, you know, that was cool. So I got all that stuff for about 60 bucks. All right, so now I want to talk a little bit about the history of the TurboGrafx, because I feel like not enough people know about it. It was sort of this forgotten console of the 16-bit generation, but it had some great games. So I'll try to make it brief for those people who aren't aware. Now, TurboGrafx-16 was released over here by NEC, but it was actually developed by a company called Hudson Soft. Now, Hudson is kind of more known as the maker of Bomberman and a whole bunch of other NES software. They wanted to build a successor platform. So they shopped their ideas around. Nintendo didn't bite, you know, the other companies didn't bite, and then NEC finally said, let's get on board this video game thing. So they co-developed what turned out to be the PC Engine. Now, the PC Engine was released in 1987 in Japan, and that's the Japanese version of the TurboGrafx-16. It's the same system. But in Japan, it was released in 1987, and it was a huge success because it was a big step up from the NES. You know, arcade games at the time looked a whole lot better than NES games. People recognized that, and the TurboGrafx-16 was, or the PC Engine was getting them a whole lot closer to that. So it was released a whole 2 years before it was released here, and it was a big success in Japan. And in 1988, it actually was outselling the NES, so that just tells you how big of a hit it was over there. Now, it took about 2 years for them to bring the TurboGrafx over here, and a big part of that was, I think, kind of the wait-and-see approach to see if it was actually a success. So I think that's sort of attributed to maybe one of those years, but then the second year, I think, was really more about the redesign, and they spent a lot of time trying to redesign the console. Because in Japan, you'll see here the PC Engine, kind of a small console, kind of cool looking, compact, and I guess more tailored towards the home in Japan. And then the American audience wanted something bigger, they thought. So they wanted something that was going to fit underneath a TV, in a stereo rack, or something like that. And, you know, obviously that design philosophy still stands today, over here in America at least. So obviously the redesign was a big part of the delay, and the delay, obviously, that extra year could have been, you know, that could have been it. One can only imagine what would have happened if the TurboGrafx had launched in 1987 or 1988 over here in America. It would be a completely different story, completely different landscape, because obviously the Sega Genesis and the Super Nintendo completely owned that generation. And the TurboGrafx-16, within pretty much a year, here in the States, was a non-factor, which is unfortunate because, you know, the PC Engine was a great system with tons of great games, and we could have probably had a whole lot more of those awesome games, but they didn't come out over here because it was just, you know, this thing kind of died. Although I do think some games were brought over to the Sega Genesis eventually, but, you know, obviously not nearly as many games as were made for the PC Engine, because there are a lot. And, you know, the PC Engine was one version of that hardware. They came out with so many versions. I don't think there's ever been a system again that had as many console variations. I don't know how many there are for sure, but the ones that I can think of off the top of my head, let's see if I can do this here. So you got the PC Engine, the original Core Graphics, you got the Core Graphics 2, you had the Super Graphics, you had the Turbo Duo, you had the Turbo Duo R, you had the Turbo Duo RX. Obviously you had the TurboGrafx CD, or the PC Engine CD, and the TurboGrafx counts as another unit. So, God, that's, I mean, how many variations is that? And that's the only ones that I can think of right now. There's more out there, and I can't even think of what they are. But anyway, so that's the brief history of the TurboGrafx. Kind of cool. I hope you enjoyed that part of it. Okay, so now what I really want to do is I want to go test out the TurboGrafx-16 because I still have no idea if it actually works. All right, so now's the moment of truth. We're going to see if the TurboGrafx actually works. I still have no idea if it works. So I'm going to try and play China Warrior. We're going to turn this thing on, and we'll know in about a split second if it actually works or not. So let's find out. Fingers crossed. Yes! I'm really bad at doing that, by the way. This guy's really intense. His face is like, ah! My punches be hurting. Alright, so here's the turbo pad, otherwise known as a controller. These were kind of cool, obviously limiting with only 2 buttons, especially for that generation, but they had the built-in turbo buttons, which is kind of nice, I guess. And then here's the console, obviously, here. That was their logo, kind of cool. Big sticking point with this console, and there were a couple RF only out. That really kind of sucks, but you can get mods, and I understand it's actually kind of easy to make your own composite cable, and it plugs into the back expansion ports over here. Then you got the power switch over here. You turn it on, it turns yellow, it means on, or whatever color that is. And then here, there's like a little blocker that keeps the hue cards from coming out while you're playing. And then the single controller port, which was absolutely stupid. You know, this is like one of the bigger sticking points with the TurboGrafx, is that you had to buy stupid multi-tap just to play with your friends. It was really bad move. Anyway. Okay, so you could see in that video that the TurboGrafx-16 had been cleaned up a little bit. So what I did to do that is I had to take it apart. So I took the plastic shell apart first. And how I did that is I used one of these security bits, because they don't use a standard Phillips head or flat head. They use the security bits or Gamebits, and you have to go to a specialty shop, or you can buy them online, and I'll put the Amazon link down below for these. They're inexpensive, but it's just kind of a pain that they don't use a standard thing. So you take apart the shell using these, and then you know, obviously it's you have the top and the bottom piece of the shell, and then the insides of the console come out as sort of one big piece wrapped up in this RF shield. And the RF shield is typically soldered shut, so you won't really be able to open it. You might be able to get a couple clips open, and what I did, I was able to do on mine. And what I did, I just took like a pressurized air, and I just cleaned out the dust, and I made sure that the cartridge slot or the hue card slot was clean. And I used the kind of the credit card method, so to speak, of to clean out the actual contacts in there. So what I did there is I took my health plan card, which is thinner than a typical credit card, and wrapped a t-shirt around it or a rag, and sprayed a little bit of alcohol, and I just sort of like kind of rubbed it in and out, because I don't want the contacts to get spread out too much. So I didn't use a full-size credit card. I felt like that just would have been too much. So I cleaned those out a little bit. And then I washed the shells, the plastic shells that didn't have any moving parts or anything. I washed those out with soap and water. And then after everything was completely dried, I put it all back together. And then I took a little bit of WD-40 on a rag, and then I just sort of wiped down the console with it and gave it a nice sheen. Okay, obviously I'm very happy that it works. I now have a TurboGrafx-16 console in my possession. It looks good. It works flawlessly. I'm very happy about that. I got a couple good games to start off my collection. I'm obviously going to build that a little bit more. I can't wait. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed the show. Ask me any questions. If you have any suggestions or anything like that, let me know in the comments. I look forward to making another video for you guys, and let's talk again soon. See ya.